What's up, everybody? Ryan Thomas here, live on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast for another episode, another Thursday episode with another guest. I told you, the viewers and listeners, that I would be bringing guests onto the show Wednesdays and Thursdays, and I have delivered 2 consecutive weeks. How about that? My next guest is Greg Thompsett of Cover One. Greg, how's it going, buddy?
Good, doing really well, man. Appreciate you having us on. Love everything you guys have going on in your work, and it's exciting to get to talk tonight.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. I appreciate your support. We've been interacting on Twitter quite a lot, and we've been talking about a lot of Buffalo sports topics, mainly the Buffalo Bills. And I definitely wanted to have you on and get your thoughts. But first and foremost, You represent a very interesting brand, to say the least, a brand that is very unique, unlike anything other than, it's unlike anything. I've never seen anything like it before. So Cover One, I want to kind of get a background on Cover One and how'd you start working with them, and just tell the viewers and listeners, if they're not sure what Cover One is, I'm sure they know to a degree, but let them know what it's all about.
Yeah, it's funny. I started out, how's the old men's hair club for men? I'm not only the president, I'm also a client. I started out as just a member, just going through, and I fell for anyone who hasn't had a chance to see. Eric Turner went through the Scouting Academy, is one of the best video breakdown guys you'll see out there, and really started Cover One. So I was a premium member of what they had going on at cover1.net, really got involved in it and started to get more and more involved. We have a premium channel, Slack, that we use to go back and forth, kind of as our own personal Twitter almost, and really started to get to know a lot of the guys there, started contributing more, started kind of moderating in there, and then jumped into helping with Aaron Quinn to host the Cover One Buffalo podcast. So that's been going for about 6 months now, 7 months now, and it's been going really well. It's been a lot of fun. Gives a chance to kind of talk about what's going on there. So a lot of what we do is the video breakdowns that you see from Eric. We have a Buffalo-centric podcast that Aaron and I host. There's another podcast that you see from Russell Brown, Christian Page, Jordan Reed, that's more draft and prospect focused. This time of the year, that's pretty much where all our time and energy is doing individual film breakdowns of each of the draft prospects. And it's honestly how I found out about just about every prospect that's there. Because it's easy to go out and go on YouTube and look at a highlight film, but seeing the all-22 breakdown with the good, the bad, and the ugly is really how you understand what a guy's ceiling and floor is, and what their potential is. So it really pulled me in, and now I spend a lot of my time recruiting more people to come check out what we have going on.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that assessment, because anytime you have multiple avenues, you guys kind of cover all bases of football, whether it's film study or whether it's prospect film study or just game tape of this past season. I've seen a lot of stuff from Cover One's Twitter, where you have like Josh Allen making really, really nice throws that people are kind of just tossing aside and saying that this guy was really only a runner, where he made a lot of great throws during the season this past year. So it's good to have somebody that is not just it's good to have an avenue that is not just kind of homers, but rather that you guys get to the actual evidence that the film doesn't lie. They say the numbers don't lie. The film doesn't lie, right?
Yeah, no, the eye in the sky never lies. It's said for a reason, and that it's easy to give a rose-colored glasses or homer view of everything that's there and just say that everything Buffalo does is awesome, and it's just not the case. There's so many things out there that you need to be able to look at critically. Hey, what do we need to improve? What's good that we can hang on to? And what do we need to be able to move forward and be constructively dissatisfied with? And that's where it comes from. Once you put in the time to do the film study, see what we really have going well, what we might feel good about, but maybe it's a little bit hollow or is something we still need to work on and upgrade. It really shows the difference of what's out there and lets you have an even-handed, balanced approach. And it's fun to go out there and just have hot takes and try to, say everything's amazing. But, realistically, you need to be able to speak to it and back it up. And that's what we try to do, is have evidence and back up for what we say.
Right. And I know Eric is a numbers guy. We were in the midst of a Twitter convo about Duke Johnson. I remember it was me, you, Eric, and I'm just saying from my point of view in that conversation, because I know Eric's going to listen to this. I definitely agreed with everything, and the numbers that he posted. It puts things in perspective, because as I said, they say the numbers don't lie, but the eye in the sky doesn't lie either. I would have a tough time thinking that Duke Johnson would just be this expendable player, but he might be in that situation with Kareem Hunt and Chubb in the building as well.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting to see what they do there. But Eric is someone that, like, I pride myself on being a football fanatic. I've loved football. I played my entire life from when I was 4 all the way through college. I've been a fanatic about it, watching. I've never missed a Bills game. Going through there and being able to watch everything, I really pride myself on knowing what's going on. And it's shocking how much I learn from Eric, and just things that I think a lot of casual fans take for granted, being able to understand, what's really the difference between cover 2, cover 3, quarters coverage, what's a robber when they're bringing one up, and being able to quickly identify those things to understand what a quarterback's reads are or why a guy went a certain way. It's really amazing how much you can learn about a game that you've spent your whole life watching. So it's been a great privilege to be able to work with them, and now getting to be able to host the show and kind of moderate the chat that they have going on there. It's been fantastic.
And from Eric's side of it, being involved in the film study and the analytics side of it that he has been involved in with Cover One, he's kind of like the face of that. It should be interesting, because there's been certain instances where, he could find himself, 10, 15 years from now, maybe even sooner than that, he might end up with a job in the National Football League one day.
we tease him about it to remember the little people when he makes it big.
That's cool. Well, if he makes it big, that would mean you make it big too, though, right? Because you guys are.
I'll go along for the ride.
Yeah. I definitely wouldn't blame you there. But I've really enjoyed the content that you guys have been posting for a long time, and I downloaded the app, and I've read a lot of the prospect reports that Eric has written, and I've listened to your show, and I've followed you on Twitter for a little while now, and there's a definite desire to not just get the content out there, but to get the content out there the right way, and to make sure that content is right. And I feel like on my end, I can only say I greatly respect that, because I can't tell you how many Twitter follower, people that I follow, that they just put stuff out there. There was a saying that Denzel Washington once said. He said, journalism nowadays is about being first, and it's not about being right. And I appreciate that you guys are about being somewhat right more than being first. That's huge.
No, I appreciate that very much. And I know those kind of things come up, that your reputation and the following that you build is going to be based on those things. It's going to be based on people appreciating what you're saying, where your takes come from, that you take time to be able to put it together, that you're right about things, that you remember the right things, that you can reference the right players, the right contracts, the right roster situation, whatever it is. And it's interesting how that happens. You can see guys out there. It's easy to say, oh, hey, we should trade for these 3 guys and sign those 7 guys. And, I understand that probably works on Madden, but that's just not the way that the NFL works.
Right.
That, we can't, sign the top center, the top right guard, the top right tackle, the top left tackle, trade for Antonio Brown, sign Le'Veon Bell. It just, you can't do all those things. It doesn't mean we're not going to have any splashy, exciting acquisitions. It's just, you need to manage expectations and understand what is a reasonable approach to these kind of things. And, I know we'll get into more of that as we talk about the offseason plans, but I spend a lot of time doing that. I feel like I spend a lot of time helping manage fans' expectations.
Me too.
Hey, I get it. That wish list sounds good, and if we get one guy off that wish list, that's probably pretty good, but here's a tier that probably makes a little bit more sense, and trying to look at those kind of things.
My friends from high school and some of my friends from college, they, obviously they know I have had this podcast the last few years, and they say, Ryan, why can't the Bills just go get A.J. Green or go get Antonio Brown? I'm like, if only it were that easy, right? If only it were that.
Yeah, All I do is click the button on that, and I get them. I don't understand what he's doing. It's not that hard.
It's not Monopoly or fantasy football. It's pretty tough. And I mean, I feel like previous regimes. I've talked about previous regimes a lot. The last few weeks on the podcast, and I talked about Doug Whaley and a lot of the failures that he had as a GM. Kind of moves that. One thing you can say about Doug Whaley was that he swung for the fences, but he oftentimes struck out, where this regime is just trying to get on base, if I were to use a baseball analogy. And to kind of segue here into the topics of discussion for the show, what are your thoughts on, first and foremost, the process, the state of the process with Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott? I know you've lived through all these past regimes that have been huge failures in Buffalo. Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott have done okay so far, I would say. What do you say about that?
So I'm a big fan. I am a genuine supporter of what they do, but there's a couple things that are about that. That doesn't mean that I think they walk on water or are infallible in their decisions, their evaluations, their acquisition costs. It just means that I believe in the process of what they're doing. I believe that having a specific plan matters. And I use a parenting analogy, something that my wife and I, we have 2 young kids. And as we were looking through, we were talking to a doctor and talking about, hey, do you recommend this parenting book or that parenting book? And they said, hey, let me give you the best advice I can give you. The fact that you're looking at a parenting book means you're going to be a good parent. Any content that's in any of the books. It means you care, and it means you're focused on wanting to do a good job. And I kind of believe that way in the way that Beane and McDermott have their process set up. The fact that they have a plan, that they're both on the exact same page, that they both believe in not taking shortcuts, not making exceptions to the character and locker room fits that they want, not making exceptions on whether football is the number one priority for a guy coming in. I think that stuff adds up and matters, and that now getting into the second, third year with continuity, I think we're one of the only teams in the NFL with the same GM, same assistant GM, same head coach, same offensive coordinator, same defensive coordinator, same quarterback. That kind of continuity that now everybody, all the scouts are shopping for the same groceries. They know what scheme fit we have. They know what kind of players to look for. That stuff's going to start paying dividends in the maybe not the splashy $15 million a year signings, but I don't know about you. How excited were you when we signed Jordan Poyer? Were you doing cartwheels because there was some awesome pickup? I had never heard of the guy. I knew that he was a backup that got hurt for a little bit in Cleveland. Those are the kind of pickups that I think we're going to start seeing is the right scheme fit, the right kind of fit that maybe flew under the radar, didn't get a chance in his other place. So I think that we're going to have some nice hits. I think that the regime has shown the ability to find some good, some nice mid-round picks and some undrafted free agents that have been, nice. And that's partially because we had to shop at the bargain basement the last little while. But I think that there's going to be misses, there's going to be whiffs, but we have a focused plan. These are 2 very hardworking, detail-oriented, focused guys that are going to follow that plan to be able to make something like this work.
And I couldn't have said that any better. I along the way of you discussing Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott and where they're at with the regime and with the team and everything, it's one of those things that I've been very shocked at how well they've been able to find, as you said, the mid-round talent or the free agents that no one would necessarily have on their short list as guys you gotta go out and get, but they've been able to go and get those guys, and they've found a role for that specific player. And that's what great regimes and great organizations do. I mean, look at the New England Patriots. I hate to prop them up any possible way I can. I really do, but they just find a specific role, even if it's one role for that player, and they maximize that player's talent within that role. And I feel like that's what Buffalo did with guys like Jordan Poyer and guys like Matt Milano, who were late round draft choices, fifth round pick, right. And
the Patriots are easy to hate, and it's something that I don't like them, but you can't help but respect what they've done. And I think the most transferable element you can take from Belichick is that he always focuses on, don't tell me what the guy can't do. I'm not going to put him on the field for the things he can't do. Tell me what he can do, and let's put him on the field to do that.
Right.
And it seems so oversimplified, but, again, going back to parenting, when your kid comes home and has A's in 3 categories and an A in one thing and 2 B's and a C, do you spend your time focusing on making him better at the thing that was a C, or do you focus on the fact that, hey, you're really good at this, let's do more of that? And it's that simple, is that when you have a guy who's a really good pass rusher but gets, struggles when you put him on in coverage, then don't put him in coverage. It's just not that complicated. And Belichick, it sounds oversimplified, but he does that over and over again. And it's silly that other people just outthink themselves.
There's so many coaches that do outthink themselves, that overthink it. And one of those coaches, I definitely think, was the coach that opposed Bill Belichick in the Super Bowl this year. I felt like the Rams could have easily won that game had they been coached right, but that's neither here nor there. That was just wishful thinking on my part, I think, of the Patriots losing the Super Bowl.
I would have loved to have seen it. And it's hard because McVay spent the entire season with a scheme that really did trick everyone, and it's hard to react and dump that so quickly and to recognize that, he's got my number, I need to pivot here, and he just waited too long to do it. And it's hard to blame someone when you've been able to make it work all year and to realize that, I need to throw out everything that's been working for us. But that's what happens when you play Belichick.
Right. He forces you to adapt and play almost to your weaknesses in order to beat him. And that's what great coaches are supposed to do. It's almost like what gets lost in translation, and what every radio show talks about, what every podcast or every sports writer writes about. They write about how can the Bills do this or how can the Bills do that. How can any team be great again? And to me, they're the blueprint of being successful and being great. If you want to know how, you have an example in your own division as far as maximizing the talent. I could say that I'm a massive football fanatic like yourself, and there were select few guys on that defense that I knew first and last name that really were massive strengths for that defense this playoff run that they had, and that's just Bill Belichick maximizing the talent that they have.
Yeah, it's crazy the fits that they find. And again, it's finding a guy who can play that role, let him play that, and then move him out. And I think that they play more guys a moderate amount of snaps than any other team in the league, that they just have guys, hey, this is what you're going to do, and you might only play 30% of the time, but when you play that 30%, you're going to be really good at this. And they do a lot of that, and it's really something that I'm glad to see the Bills do a bit more of with the defensive line rotation and things like that. I think you saw more of that with the expansion of Raphael Bush and his role as kind of the big nickel that he came in later on, and finding that, hey, these guys are good at this, let's have him do that. And it's intriguing at least to see where they take it.
I think the defensive line unit on the Buffalo Bills, even without Kyle Williams, is probably the most underrated unit on their roster. If you really look at it, the way that they've interchanged these pieces, going from Shaq Lawson to Jerry Hughes of the world, and then Trent Murphy, and then bringing in a guy like Jordan Phillips from a waiver signing. Their ability to find the talent that they have, that they've found within the last year and a half, the Jordan Phillips, the Robert Fosters, the Levi Wallaces. Levi Wallace really impressed me as the season wore on. What are your thoughts on some of those guys, some of these outlier players, some of the undrafted free agents, some of the waiver wire guys that they've been able to bring in?
It's really interesting. It's an awesome luxury now, because we have a bunch of young depth that are under contract control for an extended period of time, whether it's literally under a contract or the undrafted free agents, where you have the exclusive rights free agency and then restricted. And you basically have them for the same 4-year window that you would as a draft pick. So what we have is we've now built quality depth that we'll use Levi Wallace. I like Levi Wallace a lot. Eric really did a lot of film study on how well he really came on at the end of the year. And no matter what, we either have a competent young cornerback too, or if we say we go out and sign a guy that's a $5 to $7 million player that comes in to kind of compete, but probably to be the starter, well, then we have a really quality backup that can come in and legitimately play. The same thing, Julian Stanford is not a household name, but he got quality playing time last year and filled in reasonably well when Milano went out. And that's a guy that now is a backup and isn't going to get major reps, but if he's forced into play, he's now not coming in cold. The same thing, the defensive line rotation is fantastic. I really hope, I know Chris Brown for the Bills tweeted today that there's mutual interest from both Jordan Phillips' representation and the Bills on bringing him back. So that's encouraging. I certainly would love to see him back, especially with Kyle retiring. But I'm a big fan of Trent Murphy. When he played really well. And I think having an offseason where he's not rehabbing from ACL surgery is going to speak well to him. And it's going to allow a guy like Gary Hughes, who will be 31, to really play at a high level because we only need him for 60% of the snaps. And that kind of model where you're able to bring guys in because they're the right fit, and that Matt Milano might not have been the right fit for every defense, but he's great in our defense, and that Jordan Poyer might not be the right safety in every defense, but he's good in our defense. And being able to build that, I think now that you add in 10 draft picks, $80 million in cap space, we can bring some of those guys in, and you have that luxury that it would be awesome if we bring back Jordan Phillips, but also draft a high-end D tackle or sign another one, and all of a sudden Jordan Phillips is really high-quality depth that we only need 20 or 30% of the snaps from. And we just haven't been in a position like that in over a decade to have that kind of quality depth on a roster.
Not since I'd say, Marcel Darius and Kyle Williams were a great tandem, but the tandem that really stands out to me is like a Pat Williams and Sam Adams, or a Pat Williams and Ted Washington type tandem, where these guys are just stuffing the run and rushing the passer. That would be nice to see. And oddly enough, I'm glad you brought that up, because I posted a Buffalo Bills mock draft on the site that I've written for the last few years, myfantasysportstalk.com, for those of you that don't know. Posted a Buffalo Bills mock draft on there, and in the first round, it would be like essentially me doing a backflip through a table if they were able to pull this off. But let's just say that they were to stay at 9, and I'll get to that a little bit later, but if they were to stay at 9 and Ed Oliver was available, would you expect Buffalo to take him if he was there?
Ed Oliver has been a really hotly debated topic in the Cover One Premium chat. He is, I think it's unfair. A lot of people keep throwing out the Aaron Donald name, and that's unfair to him because no rookie should be expected to come in and be the NFL Defensive Player of the Year. That just most likely no player drafted this year is going to be Aaron Donald. That's just unfair to him. But I see the similarities. You're talking about a guy who is undersized but still powerful, has the chance to be able to win on quickness, but not lose leverage and be able to get through there and really be a disruptive force. Pretty similar to what peak Kyle Williams was. The couple questions I have, obviously he didn't play high-end competition. Going to Houston, he had some iffy games that he got to beat up on some low-level guards on the offensive line.
The guards were soft. You can say it. The guards were soft.
Yeah, there's some guys there that he should have beaten as bad as he did. But
right.
The thing that intrigues me is I want to see how big he weighs in when he comes into the combine. Just as a frame of reference, there's never been a defensive tackle drafted in the NFL that weighed 270. Now, I'm hoping he comes in higher than that, but some of the reports are that he was 272, 275, and that's hard for me to fathom that he's going to be able to hold up at defensive tackle long term. Even Aaron Donald wasn't big, but he was 295. So you're talking 20 pounds almost. So now, if those reports are off and he does weigh in at 285 or 290, I will immediately alleviate that. But I'm a little bit nervous in that if he weighs in the 270s, does that mean that you're going to want to play him at end? And then is some of his quickness not as important because now you're having to get around a defensive end and he's not a Von Miller or Khalil Mack? So I'm a little curious and I'm a little worried whether he's going to be able to translate those skills. So I was a huge fan of him. I've probably tempered that a little, but he's still someone that I certainly am very interested in if they stick at number 9.
That's very interesting, I really appreciate your take on that, because it opens up new angles for me to look at as well. I really like him as a prospect, and I think that he's somebody that's going to be good at the NFL level. But in terms of his weight and things like that, the first comparison that came to my mind was Bruce Smith, to be honest with you, because Bruce Smith was on the opposite end of the spectrum when Buffalo first drafted him. He was a little bit overweight, and he had to have guys around him like Darryl Talley be like, hey, you have so much potential. If you were to lose a little bit of weight and gain some of your quickness back that you had, a couple years ago in college, you could be really, really good. Where all these years later with Ed Oliver, it's actually the opposite. He needs to gain more weight to play his position of his natural position that he's played in college at defensive tackle. So that's very interesting. I never really looked at it that way, but I did notice in his measurables and stuff like that, 270 for defensive tackle. That's very small, very slight.
The only thing I'll add to that is if you've seen any of his videos, he is incredibly lean and fit, and that if that's something that an NFL team wants, once you get on an NFL workout program and an NFL nutritionist, if they want him to tack on weight, you can see in his frame that he'd be able to do that. So I only temper it in the fact that I think he was the guy coming into the season, or even early in the season, was probably the consensus for the number 1 overall pick. I think before Bosa kind of took over there, and I know early into the season I had never even heard of Quinnen Williams. So early on, Ed Oliver was the odds-on favorite. I think even in some Vegas boards was the favorite to be the number 1 pick. So the talent is off the charts. It's just there's a couple things that have come up in my mind that gave me pause. But you're nitpicking when you're looking at these top-end guys.
I think we find ourselves doing that in general of any prospect, whether it's top 10 or not. It's just part of the process of looking at these players. You want to see how they can be great in their own way, but you also want to see, you have to kind of see the downside of everything too, because if you don't, you're just putting blinders on.
Yeah, it's easy to, and I use it in what I used to do versus what Eric has taught me to do. It's easy to go on YouTube and just look at the highlights. And if you look at anybody's highlights, they look awesome because you're only looking at the good plays. If you want to know what you're really getting, you have to look at the good, bad, and the ugly. And I think Ed Oliver's one of those. And that if you look at his highlights, it is intoxicating. And I can see the Aaron Donald comparison. He wrecks guys. And there were games that he wrecked. Well, there's also a couple where
he was nowhere to be found.
If a good-sized guard got his hands on him, he mauled him because you had a 330-pound guard who got his hands on him. So that's going to happen more often when you're going up against not, Joe Schmo from Texas State. When you're going up against Marshall Yanda, you're not going to just beat him on pure
strength,
quickness off the line. So it's just something that I'm curious. Does that cause concern, or if he's such an elite talent that, hey, we'll deal with that? And again, like I said with Belichick, tell me what he's good at, not what he's bad at. That what he's good at is so good that it might not matter.
Right. I definitely could see kind of both scenarios playing itself out. It's going to be interesting to see because depending on where he gets drafted, they will know these things as well. And I think he would be one of those players. Like you said, he's got weight to gain, but his frame is basically inviting that weight to be gained. He's very lean and he's very ripped. So it'll be interesting to see how his body adapts to those changes. The NFL team that picks him is going to force him to make those changes. If they do draft him as a defensive tackle, he could be a defensive end as well. That could happen. But even so, 270, would you say that's slight for a defensive end as well?
No, that's about right. I think Jerry Hughes probably plays at
250,
260.
Right.
So, it totally depends on the situation. He obviously could be a fit for a lot of 3-4 teams where he could play probably any of the 3 spots outside of a nose tackle. But there's a lot of guys that if you really look at Doug Farrer is a guy that I follow and interact with a lot online, and he's always very big. When you look at a lot of the high-end defensive tackles who are disruptive, obviously Aaron Donald, but Grady Jarrett, Mike Daniels, Poona Ford, guys like that, it's because they put them at that shaded off 3 technique tackle where you're kind of the outside shoulder of the guard almost to the tackle, and then you let them penetrate and just go in and wreck shop in that 3 technique style.
They have the speed to get through, right?
Exactly.
Right.
And I think no matter what, Ed Oliver can do that. Now, what's going to matter is that's going to allow him to play 30 to 40% of the snaps and the high leverage snaps and the pass rush. What's really going to make him a high-end player and what you need to be a top 10 is, can he hold up at the point of attack? Can he set the edge against the run? Can he hold up his gap and be able to get in there and not just get thrown by? You know, sometimes the Bills during the season, you saw some of the times where we'd give up some of those inside trap runs that would be so frustrating because you'd have a guy that would flash in the backfield, but he'd get thrown by, and all of a sudden he created a huge hole behind him.
Right.
If you know, sometimes those over aggressive defensive tackles and penetrating 3 techniques, that happens. Guys like Aaron Donald, guys like Grady Jarrett are really good at penetrating hard for a yard and a half, and then holding up and being like, hey, I'm now in your backfield and going to just throw off whatever you're doing, not running 5 yards by and getting thrown by. So it's going to be interesting in how he can hold up doing that.
So we talked about Ed Oliver, and I think 9th overall, even, you know, regardless of the kind of issues that we brought up that probably won't be issues, but they're things that have to be addressed for sure, and rightfully so. But
he's going to be, he could easily go 3rd or 4th, and it wouldn't shock me.
Right. As far as some other NFL draft prospects that you're looking at as potential fits for the Buffalo Bills, who are some other guys? If you can name 2 players right off the top of your head, who are 2 guys that you really like?
So everything on me is focused on protecting the quarterback. So my top priority is who they like the best out of Jonah Williams and Juwan Taylor. I want a franchise tackle. I want a guy who we can feel comfortable, whether it's on the left or the right, whether it impacts the long-term spot for Deion Dawkins. I want a guy who can be there to protect Josh Allen and help establish the run game. So my top priority and my wish list is that whoever they like the most, and I've heard varying opinions. I know most of the season it was Jonah Williams. Now people are kind of nitpicking arm length and weight, and then all of a sudden, you know, I think Juwan Taylor for most of the season was probably a late first, early second, and now he's being talked about pretty regularly in the top 10. I trust this front office. I trust their scouting department. Whoever they think is their guy, that's my top priority. Now, if a guy like Bosa or Quinnen Williams or Josh Allen, the Kentucky Josh Allen, falls and you get a big-time disruptive pass rusher, that's great. But even ahead of an Ed Oliver, or I know some people like Greedy Williams, some people like some of the other top, Montez Sweat or whoever else you like.
It's funny because I was actually talking with another gentleman about Williams, and it's very frustrating with the Alabama offensive lineman that people can even say, well, I don't know if he can translate to the National Football League. I know that there's been other offensive linemen that haven't. Obviously, not every player at Alabama has been a resounding success. Trent Richardson's playing in the Alliance of American Football. You know, I'm not throwing shade at Trent. He's doing real well over there, but I definitely feel like the criticism for him, for Williams, has been a little bit too much, especially in regards to the BCS National Championship game. He was going up against Clyde Farrell, who is phenomenal. He's a phenomenal pass rusher. So, like you said, he's going up against these great defensive ends that are pretty awesome.
That game drove me nuts. Everyone saw the one gif of the bull rush that he caught Jonah Williams off balance. And
outside of that, he did all right.
Another first-round pick made him look bad, and that was an embarrassing bad snap. And you want to know what? That might happen during the season. You know, that he might get caught off balance by Khalil Mack, because that's what awesome pass rushers do. You want to know what you saw if you watched the other 60 snaps? Was Jonah Williams dominating Cleveland Farrell, and that he held him under control the whole rest of the game, or Christian Wilkins, or Dexter Lawrence, or the other first-round picks that they have on their defensive line. He did it. You know, it's so funny how that works with an offensive lineman. You give up one big sack and you had a bad game. but you're expected to just pitch a shutout. So he did. It was an embarrassing snap. It was, Cleveland Farrell absolutely got the best of him and looked really good. But any of the other plays that Farrell made in that game were on the stunts and moves where he went inside the guard and over the center.
Right.
He
didn't even involve Williams.
Other play. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So, but I get it, and there's all kinds of your box score scouts and your Twitter tough guys that say, "Oh, you got dominated in the national championship game." But no, I know what play you're talking about, and I'm sure that's the only snap you watched. But no, he actually didn't. He had a pretty good game, but he did have one really bad, embarrassing snap that everybody got highlighted. But by all means, if that causes him to drop to 9 and nobody else picks him, and we get our chance at him without having to do anything, I'll take it. People can use whatever the reason they want to let him fall a little bit.
And that's what I was referring to at the top of the podcast. It's not about being the first to react to something, whether it's a GIF or a meme or a bad play that a lineman, or a play I should say that the lineman didn't make. You watch the rest of the game. Zero in on that player if you think that player is that bad, if you think that player is that inconsistent. Let him actually prove that he is or that he isn't before we say, I don't know if this guy's a top 10 pick just based on one rush in a game.
And I'll say that's a perfect example that I'm as guilty as anybody else. When the game is on, I am not in scout mode. I'm not watching the game in all 22. And I'm watching the ball like anybody else. And I know it's hard not to do that, but I do it afterwards. So when I'm watching the game, I'm watching like everybody else. I'm watching the broadcast view. I'm watching the ball, and I'm watching whoever blew up enough to get a highlight out of it. Afterwards, when I watch the All-22, I'll watch most of the Bills games 4 or 5 times because I want to go back and I'll look at it. I'll watch that snap and I'll watch the left side of the line. Then I'll watch the right side of the line. Then I'll watch the receivers, or then I'll watch the back coming out of the backfield or see what else is going on. And then you can see who consistently had a good game. And when you look at the actual All-22 breakdown of it, you see that, hey, it really was a pretty consistent, solid game besides that one bad snap.
The offensive line unit as a whole is very tough to judge because it's such it's literally a group of guys. If one guy is not protecting, it might cause a domino effect where another guy is not really in the right position to protect his guy. So it's definitely the unit on the roster that is the thinnest, and it's the unit on the roster that is the most pressing of a need because Josh Allen kind of turned lemons into lemonade, so to speak, for what he had around him, in my opinion. I thought
thank God he could run.
Right, thank God he could run, and thank God he could get out of bounds, and to be honest, thank God he could take a hit because he took a lot of them. He took a lot of inadvertent hits that would be a flag if it was number 12 of the New England Patriots. We'll just say that.
Yeah, I think that all offensive lines are kind of a 50-50 deal. Half of it is talent. Half of it you need talent. Half of it you can't be that great if Vlad Dukas is starting for you. That's just the facts of how it works. However, half of it is the continuity and gelling together and having that consistency. And I've kind of reserved myself to the fact that I'm pretty sure this offensive line rebuild is going to be a 2-year deal, and that I think we're going to see multiple upgrades this year. I think we see 2 more additions. I don't know that I count Spencer Long as an upgrade per se, but he's an addition. I think we see 2 more, one in the draft, one more in free agency. And then that means that we're going to have Deion Dawkins, some combination of Wyatt Teller or Spencer Long, and the 2 other additions that are there. So we're probably going to have 1 or 2 spots that are not awesome and that are maybe not long-term fits. But then we also have a ton of cap space and a whole other slew of draft picks in 2020 where we can then add maybe another splurge signing, maybe another premium first or second round pick. And then I think from 2020 on, we could really have a solidified, consistent offensive line where you can start to gel together. And then those lines that have played 2, 3, 4 years together is where you really start to see that continuity and that balance come together where it's not just talent and you're really able to build and work together. So I do think it's critical. It's our number one need. It helps the run game. It helps the run game allow for play action.